this edition of the Kacee Show. Today's episode, we're going to do a live reaction to the third Republican debate held in Miami last week. Now, if you remember, the first two debates were pretty interesting, although they were without Donald Trump being present. But if you paid attention, we actually did episodes to the previous two you can watch on X and YouTube. But with that being said, it was really interesting to see Vivek Ramaswamy, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, and you obviously have some obscure figures like Chris Christie and Doug Burgum, and obviously Mike Pence. It was really cool to see a plethora of figures try to make their case to be the next president of the United States. Obviously, some things changed since the previous two debates. Asa Hutchinson obviously did not have enough votes to get to the second one, and in this case, Doug Burgum did not qualify to make the third debate. So there will be no Doug Burgum for the third debate, and also, just last week, Mike Pence announced that he will drop his run for president of the United States as well. So it's going to be Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, and Vivek Ramaswamy. Well, actually, I'm sorry, and Tim Scott as well. So 5 of the 6 qualifying Republican candidates made it to this debate that we're about to react to. And there's some key factors or key points I think people should know before going into this. Now, if you notice, Vivek Ramaswamy has quite different views than many of the Republican candidates on the stage. And it really showed the previous two debates because when it came to Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, and even Ron DeSantis at one point, they consistently attacked Vivek. Now, why that is, it's still unclear to see. He's actually behind Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis right now. He's about 5% in the projected polls. But because Vivek is pro-America and hasn't condemned anything Trump's done, they consistently crucify him and they try to just push him down. And what we noticed from the first debate, and obviously this is his first ever debate, he didn't come back at these politicians like he should have, especially the way that they were talking down on him and disrespecting him. So it would be pretty interesting to see if he actually attacks some of these guys, or I guess women in some case when it comes to Nikki Haley. He was actually quite better in the second debate because he called out Nikki Haley for profiting so much at her time at Raytheon and the United Nations, and even governor of South Carolina, signing all these military contracts. So he calls out Nikki Haley when it comes to that. And he essentially came back at Christie and Pence for calling out Donald Trump. So Trump is winning by a landslide in the polls right now. It says he's about 61% nationally. And it does look like it's going to stay that way. Even with him not showing up to the previous debates, it really hasn't hurt his presidential campaign at all. He's just kind of stayed a little secluded. He's done, private interviews with Tucker Carlson and Fox reporters, but just him and the journalists, not like it's a debate or anything. So we'll have to see if he does, in fact, join one of these mainstream debates. It would be interesting to see him, maybe come in towards the end when it's pretty much down to like 2 other candidates, basically to, make his mark. And like the one thing I do agree with DeSantis is that, I think it would be interesting to see Trump basically defend his position as his time as president. And obviously, he did a great job, and I think he's the best president of the 21st century. But at the same time, I would like to know why exactly our national debt went $7 trillion higher than what it previously was. I would like to know why that wall was not finished in Mexico. So there is a few questions that I have myself, that I would like to have answered. And I would also like to see how he compares to the other candidates on stage who are spending millions and, hell, some might even be spending billions of dollars just to keep their campaign afloat. It's really all about what the people want, and whether that's Donald Trump, whether that's Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, or for God's sakes, Joe Biden. I hope not. So my predictions for this debate, I think that the news anchors are going to ask a lot of questions about Israel and Hamas. That's probably going to take up at least half of the debate, in my opinion. They're going to spend a lot of time on that. They're going to talk about the border, maybe even bring up the UAW strike again. Who knows? But when it comes to the candidates, I think they're going to attack Vivek again, whether it's the MSM, whether it's other candidates on stage. I think someone's going to have some reason or find some sort of way to call out Vivek and pin an argument on him. That's just what I think. We'll have to see. But other than that, I think it's going to be a pretty just regular debate. I mean, to be honest, I think the second one wasn't that interesting. I think it was all right. But obviously, without Donald Trump, it definitely makes an incremental difference for the worse of things. So, we'll have to see if this is going to be, one of those boring debates, or if this is actually going to be something that's eye-catching and, keeps your attention. So here we go.
Tonight, a critical test in the race for the White House. 5 Republicans battling to become their party's 2024 presidential nominee. The candidates ready to make their case on why they're prepared to be commander-in-chief amid 2 wars on the world stage, how they plan to tackle stubborn inflation, and how they can unite a deeply divided electorate. Who is best to take on President Biden?
Like I said, they're going to mention the war quite a bit.
First beat former President Trump, who's far ahead in the polls. The candidates are here. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley, entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, and South Carolina Senator Tim Scott.
From NBC News, the Republican presidential debate. Live from the Adrian Arst Center in Miami, Florida.
Here we go. Round 3.
And good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Republican presidential debate. I'm Lester Holt, anchor of NBC Nightly News.
Good evening. I'm Kristen Welker, moderator of NBC's Meet the Press.
Hello, I'm Hugh Hewitt, host of Salem Radio's The Hugh Hewitt Show.
We are now just 68 days from the Iowa caucuses when Republican primary voters will begin to determine their party's nominee for president. Tonight, we'll question 5 candidates seeking that nomination on how they're best prepared to be commander-in-chief. And, of course, how best to bring down prices impacting Americans across the country. We have 2 hours for a serious debate on the issues that matter most to Republican voters. Candidates will have 1 minute and 30 seconds for answers and the opportunity for a closing statement. Follow-ups will be at the discretion of all of us at the table, the moderators. Invoking a candidate's name or policy does not necessarily mean the mentioned candidate is entitled to a response. We want to caution all the candidates not to interrupt or speak over your fellow debaters. If you talk over each other, the voters can't hear you. And given the critical issues we're facing specifically on the world stage, we want everyone to hear every word you have to say. Continued interruptions may result in loss of additional questions. And to our audience, please hold your applause so that the candidates can be heard. With that said, let's have a good debate. All right, our first question, the opening question, is one for all of you. Donald Trump is the first ex-president in more than 100 years to run for the White House again. And he remains popular among Republican primary voters as his legal challenges mount. Governor DeSantis, let me begin with you on this one. Speak to Republican voters who are supporting Donald Trump. Why should you and not him be the Republican nominee to face Joe Biden a year from now?
This country is in trouble, and the elites that have put us here, they don't care about you. They don't care that you're having to grapple with higher grocery prices or have higher gas prices. They don't care that your family's less secure because of the open border that's allowed drugs and even terrorists to come into this country. Well, I care. I am not going to sit idly by and let this country continue its downward spiral. We need leadership, and we need it now. I'll take the hits, I'll take the arrows, I'll take the slings, because ultimately it's not about me. It's about you. I will fight for you. I will make sure to lead this country's revival, and I will win for you and your family. Actions speak louder than words. We don't have time for excuses, and it's not something that we're going to be able to have all these distractions. As a veteran, I will get the job done. Now, if you look where we are now, it's a lot different than we were in 2016. And Donald Trump's a lot different guy than he was in 2016. He owes it to you to be on this stage and explain why he should get another chance. He should explain why he didn't have Mexico pay for the border wall.
Yeah,
he should explain why he racked up so much debt. He should explain why he didn't drain the swamp. And he said Republicans were going to get tired of winning. Well, we saw last night, I'm sick of Republicans losing. In Florida, I showed how it's done. 1 year ago here, we want a historic victory, including a massive landslide right here in Miami-Dade County. That's how we have to do it.
Not looking like you're going to win Florida.
I promise you this, as the nominee, next November I'll get the job done, and as president, I will deliver.
Your time is up. Let me turn to Ambassador Haley. Audience, let me turn to Ambassador Haley. Why you and not the former president?
Well, I think you look at the fact that we're almost $34 trillion in debt. 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. 50% of American families can't afford diapers. 1 in 6 American families can't pay their utility bills. You have parents who are worried about what's being said or taught to their child in the classroom. There's no transparency. We have anti-Semitism all over our college campuses, and students feel unsafe. You've got an open border where terrorists can come through, and we've got wars happening all over us, and there are dangers around us. You know, everybody wants to talk about President Trump. Well, I can talk about President Trump. I can tell you that I think he was the right president at the right time. I don't think he's the right president now. I think that he put us $8 trillion in debt, and our kids are never going to forgive us for that. I think the fact that he used to be right on Ukraine and foreign issues, now he's getting weak in the knees and trying to be friendly again.
We're not going to forgive you for profiting so much off your military contracts. We can't live in the past. We can't live in other headlines. We've got to start focusing on what's going to make America strong and proud. And that's what I'm focused on doing. Let's make sure we pay down our debt. I think we need an accountant in the White House. Let's make sure that we have transparency in the classroom. As a mom, I know what that means. Let's make sure we secure our borders so that our families are safe. Let's get crime down, because our families want to know that they can be safe no matter where they go. And as the wife of a combat veteran, I will tell you, a military needs to know we have our back, and we need to make sure that America is strong.
Ambassador, thank you very much. Let me just caution the audience. Let's not go down this road. We've asked you to please, keep restrain yourselves, and would be helpful so we can hear the candidates, because these are important issues, and the voters want and need to hear them. Mr. Ramaswamy, let me turn to you. Please make your case. Why should you be the nominee and not the former president?
I think there's something deeper going on in the Republican Party here, and I am upset about what happened last night. We've become a party of losers at the end of the day. It was a cancer in the Republican establishment. Let's speak the truth. I mean, since Ronna McDaniel took over as chairwoman of the RNC in 2017, we have lost 2018, 2020, 2022, no red wave that never came. We got trounced last night in 2023. And I think that we have to have accountability in our party. For that matter, Ron, if you want to come on stage tonight, you want to look the GOP voters in the eye and tell them you resign, I will yield my time to you. And frankly, look, the people there cheering for losing in the Republican Party. Think about who's moderating this debate. This should be Tucker Carlson, Joe Rogan, and Elon Musk. We'd have 10 times the viewership.
That's
asking
so
questions
true.
that GOP primary voters actually care about, and bringing more people into our party.
Free
speech.
speech.
Democrats, and we've got Kristen Welker here.
Amen.
Do you think the Democrats would actually hire Greg Gutfeld to host a Democratic debate? They wouldn't do it. And so the fact of the matter is, I mean, Kristen, I'm going to use this time because this is actually about you in the media and the corrupt media establishment. Ask you, the Trump-Russia collusion hoax that you pushed on this network for years, was that real, or was that Hillary Clinton made up disinformation? Answer the question. Go.
Mr. Roberts.
Oh my God. That's awesome.
We need accountability.
I don't think that's ever been done before.
They rigged the 2016 election. They rigged the 2020 election with the Hunter Biden laptop story.
Just throws the question right back. That is, that's comedy.
Governor Christie, why?
It makes perfect sense. Wow. That's charisma right there.
Let's not do this.
Let's not do this.
Speak. Governor Christie, why
See, they're even getting triggered. They hated that.
Well, Lester, look, you said it at the beginning of the debate. We are dealing with extraordinarily important issues facing this country right now. We have our greatest ally in the Middle East under fire from a terrorist group that has committed to wiping them and every Jewish person in this world off the map.
That's the greatest issue we're facing right now as Americans.
With Vladimir Putin.
Okay, so that's a second. Ukraine's number 2. Israel's 1. Ukraine's 2.
Wants to put the old band back together.
What are you going to say 3? Somewhere else? 20,000 miles away?
And Poland after that.
Get off the stage.
We have inflation in this country.
The USSR is
choking.
Literally dead. What are you talking about?
Every American family that wants to try to rise up and give their children a better life. And tonight, we need to decide
an obscure governor from like 10 years ago that left with a 2% approval rating. Get off the stage.
Who's going to make this country look once again, not just inward, but look outward at the world and say America is the country, the indispensable nation.
Oh, now you mentioned America.
A safer world,
The first time he did.
World, American innovation, American hard work has always been.
But let's give money to Israel and Ukraine
because
we're America. That's what makes us American. Yeah, you're going to be the president.
Okay. We're not going to be small, and I'll say this about Donald Trump. Anybody who's going to be spending the next year and a half of their life focusing on keeping themselves out of jail and courtrooms cannot lead this party or this country.
Right,
and it needs to be
Are you kidding me? The one guy that says he's literally ran a court of appeals office says what happened to innocent until proven guilty?
Well, certainly.
Are you kidding me?
Without any question,
that is insane.
The truth of my life destroys the lies of the radical left. We need a president and a candidate who will actually.
This dude is literally if Little Bill grew up.
Attract independent voters into our party. The Great Opportunity Party is now winning back African American voters and Hispanic voters because we are working on a foundation based on faith. Our nation is facing some deep challenges. It is the loss of faith in this nation that is a part of the erosion that we're seeing every single day. It's restoring faith, restoring our Christian values that will help this nation once again become the city on the hill. When Ronald Reagan talked about the city on the hill, he was coming from Matthew 5. When President Lincoln talked about a house divided, that was Mark. Our founding documents speak to the importance of a faith foundation. You don't have to be a Christian for America to work for you, but America does not work without a faith-filled Judeo-Christian foundation. I would be the president that helps us restore faith in God, faith in each other, and faith in our future. Without that focus, none of the issues, the policies matter. We have to get back to being a nation that is, in fact, the city on the hill, that believes in each other enough for us to fight for that future.
Senator Scott, thank you.
He's a good dude. He just doesn't have it. It's pretty obvious.
The next commander-in-chief, you'll all be fielding questions first from me and the Republican Jewish Coalition, and then from Kristen and Hugh. So as we continue forward, the Israel-Hamas war is barely a month old. Tonight, Israeli troops are fighting inside Gaza City with over 200 hostages who remain captive there, and civilian casualties mount inside Gaza. As President of the United States, what would you be urging Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do at this moment? Governor DeSantis.
I would be telling Bibi, finish the job once and for all with these butchers, Hamas. They're terrorists. They're massacring innocent people. They would wipe every Jew
on
off
both
the
sides.
globe if they could. He cannot live with that threat right by his country. That Hamas should release every hostage and they should unconditionally surrender. I'm sick of hearing the media. I'm sick of hearing other people blame Israel just for defending itself. We will stand with Israel.
You're going to blame them for killing innocent people?
In public
and
in
not
private.
Blame them?
I can tell you, as governor, I actually did something about it. Biden's neglect has been atrocious. We had Floridians that were over there after the attack. He left them stranded. They couldn't get flights out. So I scrambled resources in Florida. I sent planes over to Israel, and I brought back over 700 people to safety. There could have been more hostages had we not acted. And I'll tell you this, I met the first plane load.
Well, there's going to be more hostages if you want to send our sons and daughters to war.
And she said, my daughter had been saying the last 2 nights, Mommy, I don't want to hear any more bombs, no more rockets. I just want to get back to Florida. So there's a difference between words and deeds. We acted and we saved lives.
Thank you. Ambassador Haley, what would you do? What would you be urging Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to do? Would you consider humanitarian pause, for example?
The first thing I said to him when it happened was I said, finish them. Finish them. And the reason is I worked on this every day when I was at the United Nations. And we have to remember that they have to, 1, eliminate Hamas, 2, support Israel with whatever they need, whenever they need it, and 3, make sure we bring our hostages home. We need to be very clear-eyed to know there would be no Hamas without Iran. There would be no Hezbollah without Iran. There would not be the Houthis without Iran. And there wouldn't be the Iranian militias in Syria and Iraq that are trying to hit our military men and women if it hadn't been for Iran. And who is funding Iran right now? China is buying oil from Iran. Russia is getting drones and missiles from Iran. Iran, and there is an unholy alliance. We need to be clear-eyed. The last thing we need to do is to tell Israel what to do. The only thing we should be doing is supporting them and eliminating Hamas. It is not that Israel needs America. America needs Israel. They are the tip of the spear when it comes to this Islamic terrorism, and we need to make sure that we have their backs in that process.
All right.
We need to put our own nation before some other nation halfway across the world that, again, if you look up videos of Netanyahu, he literally says terrible things about the United States.
Go
Look
one step further. The founding vision of Israel was based on the idea that they don't want to depend on anybody else's sympathy or direction in defending themselves. So what I would tell Bibi is that Israel has the right and the responsibility to defend itself. I would tell him to smoke those terrorists on his southern border.
Yeah,
and
let
then I'll
them
tell him as
deal with
President of
it.
the United States, I'll be smoking the terrorists on our southern border. That's his responsibility. This is our responsibility. That's how we move forward. But I want to be careful to avoid making the mistakes from the neocon establishment of the past.
Neocon, yeah.
Corrupt politicians
Nikki
in
Haley.
both parties spent trillions, killed millions, made billions for themselves in places like Iraq and Afghanistan, fighting wars that sent thousands of our sons and daughters, people my age, to die in wars that did not advance anyone's interests, adding $7 trillion to our national debt. And Joe Biden sold off our foreign policy. Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, got a $5 million bribe from Ukraine. That's why we're sending $200 billion back to that same country. The fact of the matter is the Republican Party is not that much better. You have the likes of Nikki Haley, who stepped down from her time at the UN. Bankrupt or in debt was her family. Then she becomes a military contractor. She joins the board of Boeing and otherwise, and is now a multimillionaire. So I think that that's wrong when Republicans do it or Democrats do it. That's the choice we face. Do you want a leader from a different generation who's going to put this country first? Or do you want Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels?
Yeah, see, that's what I'm talking about, Vivek.
Ramaswamy, thank you.
Yeah.
Senator Scott. Yes. Senator,
see, they pushed him so much those previous debates. Now he's ready to fire back.
With the Prime Minister, you tell him what?
That's good.
Well, number one, I would tell
Dick Cheney in 3-inch heels.
Prime Minister Netanyahu, not only do you have the responsibility and the right to wipe Hamas off of the map.
He just repeated what Vivek just said.
We will support you. We will be there with you. We'll stand shoulder to shoulder. There will be no daylight. But I would change the station a little bit, though, and head back home to America. I would say to President Biden, diplomacy only is a weak strategy. Appeasement leads to war. From President Obama to President Biden, Obama sent millions to Iran. Frankly, President Biden has sent billions to Iran. That is why I've said that there's blood dripping from the hands of President Obama and President Biden. I would tell President Biden with great clarity, if you want to stop the 40-plus attacks on military personnel in the Middle East, you have to strike in Iran. If you want to make a difference, you cannot just continue to have strikes in Syria on warehouses. You actually have to cut off the head of the snake, and the head of the snake is Iran and not simply their proxies.
Vivek also
for us
said
to
that.
have a powerful response from America,
Jeez, he's really soaking in
we
what
have to
Vivek is
be
saying
in a
from these
position of
debates.
strength. As President of the United States, my foreign policy is simple. You cannot negotiate with evil. You have to destroy it.
All right, Senator Scott, thank you.
First, like to say they're 5-inch heels, and I don't wear them unless you can run in them.
We've got two of you on stage.
The second thing I will say is
He's referring to Ron
our heels
DeSantis
are not
looking
for
like
a
he
fashion
wears
statement, they're
freaking
for ammunition.
heels with his
What we
whatever the
need
heck
to
he's
be
wearing.
doing for Iraq and
boots.
Syria is, first of all, the idea that our men and women could be targeted and that we've allowed almost 100 hits to happen under Biden's watch is unthinkable. We need to understand this is Iran giving the green light, telling them what to do, and we shouldn't be doing the tit for tat like what Joe Biden has done. We need to go and take out their infrastructure that they are using to make those strikes with so they can never do it again. Iran responds to strength. You punch them one and you punch them hard and they will back off. But what we don't need is Biden falling all over himself to get back in the Iran deal. Him giving $6 billion to get 5 hostages home. Him telling Netanyahu now that he needs a pause or a ceasefire. We don't need him going and sitting there tiptoeing around Iran because he thinks they're going to do something. You don't don't respond to an enemy and a terrorist with fear. You respond with strength. When you do that, that's when the world pays attention, and that's when Iran stops.
Thank you. Governor DeSantis, if I can continue with you. Just today, the U.S. launched another one of its limited airstrikes against targets in Syria, this time Iranian-linked facility. How far would you go militarily to hold Iran accountable?
Well, first, Matt, thanks for your question, and I appreciate what you've done over the last month. I know it's been very difficult for the community, and appreciate you guys rallying together in difficult times. I actually served in Iraq back in the day, and we had al-Qaeda in Iraq. You had Shia militias that were funded by Iran that were killing hundreds and hundreds of U.S. troops. And as commander-in-chief, I am not going to put our troops in harm's way unless you're willing to defend them with everything you have. Biden has them out there. They're sitting ducks. He's doing glancing blows. That's just inviting more attacks from the Iranians. I would say you harm a hair on the head of an American service member, and you are going to have hell to pay. We are not just going to sit there and let our service members be sitting ducks, and that's true whether it's Iran or whether it's any country on the world. We have to be strong, and we have to defend
American
the people who
diplomats.
defend us.
Joe Biden.
All right, thank you, Governor. Now our second and final question from Matthew Brooks of the Republican Jewish Coalition. Please watch.
Jewish students across the country are threatened and under attack. What do you say to Jewish students on college campuses who feel unsafe given the dramatic rise in anti-Semitism? And what do you say to university presidents and college presidents who have not met the moral clarity moment to forcefully condemn Hamas terrorism?
Mr.
I'd like to see the percentages.
Absolutely. I think the
these
scourge
attacks.
of anti-Semitism across this country, including at places like my alma maters and places like Brooklyn Bridge in New York, it's sad to see, but here's what history teaches us. Anti-Semitism is a symptom of a deeper cancer in a country and a society that is lost, and we are lost. Several years ago, when I wrote my first book, Woke Inc., I was talking about they were chanting death to America. Death to white people, death to Christians. Nobody was waking up back then. Now it's even bad. Now they're saying death to Israel and worse. So it is wrong, but we have to get to the root cause here. Now, I think it's really important that we do this through leadership, not censorship. Leadership means fill that void with purpose and meaning.
Yeah, it doesn't mean cancel people because they don't agree with it.
To irrelevance. These kids, they have no idea
hate speech
what the
is
heck
free
they're even
speech,
talking
technically.
about when they're siding with Hamas over Israel. They are fools. But I also want to caution here, if we go the direction of Ron DeSantis or Nikki Haley, with whom I respectfully disagree on this issue, pro-censorship, telling student groups to disband, mark my words. Yeah. Soon they will say if you question a vaccine and its side effects, you're a bioterrorist. Soon they will say that if you show up at a school board meeting, you're a domestic terrorist.
You disagree with
Soon
something, you're anti-Semite.
Prisoners should be released.
It's the same thing as Black Lives Matter.
So that's where this
yet the Republican Party is still siding with that. Nikki Haley, DeSantis.
Because that creates a worse underbelly. We quell it through leadership by calling it out. These university administrators have lost their way, and we need leadership at the top in the United States of America that restores our founding values and that has no place for this kind of anti-Semitic hate. That's where I stand while respecting our Constitution.
Your time is out. Senator Scott, let me get you
a reasonable answer. A few points I disagree with, but
let me just say to every single university president in America, federal funding is a privilege, not a right. Number one. Number two, to every student who've come to our country on a visa to a college campus, your visa is a privilege, not a right. Number three, any campus that allows for anti-Semitism and hate, to allow students to encourage terrorism, mass murder, and genocide, you should lose your federal funding today, period. To all the students on visas who are encouraging Jewish genocide, I would deport you from those campuses. We have to stand strong.
I don't think you're
with our Jewish Americans.
Giving these people the fundamental ideals of what it means to be American if they can't speak out for what they think to be true, even though if it's wrong.
In a library, being
I disagree with him here.
To hide. On our streets in New York, a Jewish citizen has the right to walk on the streets of America.
And as an American, you have the right
to go to college campuses,
to free speech, freedom of religion, the First Amendment, Tim.
We will restore that. I started working on anti-Semitism on college campuses in 2017 because even then there was a rise of anti-Semitism on college campuses. We must force the people off those campuses and frankly,
thank you. Let me turn to the
anti-Semitism is the 2023 version of Black Lives Matter.
I was the first presidential candidate to say, if you are here on a student visa as a foreign national, you're making common cause with Hamas, I'm canceling your visa and I'm sending you home. No questions asked.
What do you mean by that? There has to be a basis.
I have friends here in Florida.
If you're violently doing something and breaking law, yes. But if you're using your First Amendment,
university campus at all outside
even if you're not a citizen, I don't see the issue.
You have Jewish students
two different issues:
for their lives
violence and freedom of speech.
Joe Biden should have the Department of Justice on these college campuses and holding the universities accountable for civil rights violations. When you should not have money going to these places.
Violence.
I already acted in Florida.
Protesting and
we
freedom
had a group
of speech,
Students for Justice of
different.
Palestine. They said they are common cause with Hamas. They said, we're not just in solidarity, this is what we are. We deactivated them. We're not going to use state tax dollars to fund jihad. No way. And what is Biden doing? Not only is he not helping the Jewish students who are being persecuted, he is launching an initiative to combat so-called Islamophobia.
Joe Biden isn't helping anybody.
It's the anti-Semitism that's spiraling out of control. Right. That is what we have to confront. And as president, I can tell you this, we are not going to stand for this on college campuses any longer.
All right, Governor, thank you. Let me turn to Governor
I completely disagree with
that. And Muslim population. Last month, as you know, a 6-year-old Palestinian-American boy was killed in Illinois by his landlord. His mother was also stabbed more than a dozen times in what has been charged as a hate crime. What do you say to Muslim Americans who are also feeling afraid for their safety right now?
Lester, I'm the only one on the stage who's actually had experience in dealing with this. I was appointed by President Bush to be the U.S. Attorney in New Jersey on September 10th,
We've heard that 3 times now.
And when I took over that job after the September 11th attacks, I had to deal with a situation in our state that was explosive. We're the most ethnically diverse state in this country. And so first, we heard credible reports about Jewish students and synagogues being threatened in our state in the aftermath of 9/11. We made sure that we sent federal agents to those synagogues and we protected them, and the same thing should be being done now. At the very same time, I personally went from mosque to mosque in New Jersey and met with the leaders of those mosques and with the members of the mosques. And I said to them, law enforcement is on your side to protect you, regardless of your religion, if you are going to comply with the law. And we developed fabulous relationships with Muslim Americans all across the state of New Jersey, and we stopped any hate crimes that were going on either against Jewish Americans in New Jersey or Muslim Americans in New Jersey. It takes leadership, Lester, to know how to do this. You must work with both sides. Both sides need to know it, but let us never have a false moral equivalence between Hamas and Hezbollah and the Jewish people. The Jewish people stand for right and justice, and Hamas and Hezbollah stand for death.
Governor Kacee, thank you. Ambassador Haley,
like I said, the problem is they've got corrupt leaders.
Simply afraid right now in this current environment that we're talking about.
I think, you look at the country, and the country is all out of sorts. I think, look at what these kids are dealing with on college campuses. What makes me so angry is not only do you have the kids barricaded in the library, they've said they were going to shoot up the kosher dining hall. You've got kids' dorm rooms who are being set on fire because they have something related to Israel on their doors.
I think it's that severe.
No person
I'd like to see
should
the
ever
number
feel
of
in
cases.
danger like this. And this is what I would say about our college presidents, is if the KKK were doing this, every college president would be up in arms. This is no different. You should treat it exactly the same.
Again, it's all about the numbers.
Anti-Semitism is just as awful as racism.
See how many lootings are going on in San Francisco, states like that. Probably a lot more violence in these college campus incidents.
Let me remind you something. Hamas said
Not to
death
underplay
to
it,
Israel
but
and death to America. They hate and would kill you too. And the
And
idea
Netanyahu
that they're
hates
talking
America.
about genocide for the Jewish people,
He literally
that's
called
not
us
the
weak.
values of of America. That's not us. We're better than that.
Netanyahu said he could steer America's moral compass in whatever direction he aspires.
Towards anybody. We need to go back and soul search in our country and remember what we are about. And we are about taking care of people, not going and making them live in fear because some other terrorist activity says they want to destroy them.
Ambassador, thank you. Kristen.
Lester, thank you. This is
all
another
mainstream
question
media
for the entire
bullshit.
field, so you will all get a chance to respond. But Senator Scott, I'd like to start with you. The United States has given Ukraine financial and military support since the war began more than 600 days ago. President Zelensky told me on Sunday if Russia isn't stopped now, quote, the price will be higher for the United States, and Americans would be forced to, quote, send your sons and daughters to defend NATO countries. Senator Scott, where do you stand on more funding for Ukraine?
I certainly have been very supportive of Ukraine. I believe that ultimately we should make sure that the President of the United States states what is America's national vital interest in Ukraine. It is actually integrating the Russian military. We've been very
the one that doesn't exist?
Our resources and our weaponry and
the USSR parted ways a long time ago, bud. Wake up.
Ukrainian blood to achieve that objective.
No, it's a waste of our taxpayer money going to places that, frankly, people like you couldn't even pinpoint on a map.
People are frustrated that they do not have a president who reminds us.
Frustrated that we're sending our fucking money over there, literally losing the value of our currency.
We need those answers for us to continue to see the support.
It's self-destruction.
And at the same time,
we don't need to be.
A package that's been offered by the president for Ukraine and Israel, that's the wrong approach. We need to focus specifically on providing Israel with the $14 billion that they need.
We don't have that. No, we don't have that money.
100% undeniably standing.
We are undeniably destroying our own currency, giving no faith to our hardworking people.
Go to our southern border and close our southern border with the
resources. See, that's what we should
necessary.
do. That's what we should do. Number one problem, not Ukraine, not Israel. It's ridiculous.
Thousands of people have come from Yemen, Iran, Syria, and Iraq. If we're going to
from the southern border, thousands every single day.
Our border, we have to do it now.
Senator Scott, thank you.
And
but just to be very
put
clear,
it first,
if
America
you were president,
first.
If you were in the Oval Office today, would you sign off on more military funding for Ukraine, or would you discontinue it?
Bottom line is we have to first have a level of accountability that allows the American people to understand where the resources have gone. Number one. Number two, after we have that responsibility taken care of and accountability, then we have an opportunity to look at the overall strategy that helps us degrade the Russian military while we use our resources.
Which, again, that doesn't exist.
Keeping our NATO partners safe from the Russian military is absolutely essential.
Vivek is laughing. He knows what's
Article
up.
5 would require to support and to defend NATO, our troops on the ground. The fastest way for us to eliminate that possibility is for us to destroy, to the extent possible, the Russian military. By doing so, we actually achieve the objective of keeping our military
not the
home.
priority.
And that's good news.
Thank you, Senator.
How do they
Mr.
believe in
Ramaswamy,
this
are
garbage?
you persuaded
They
by
are completely
President
backwards.
Zelensky's urgent new plea? Where do you stand on more funding?
I'm absolutely unpersuaded. And I'm actually enjoying watching the Ukraine hawks quietly, delicately tiptoe back from their position as this thing has unwound into a disaster. The first half of this race, I was the only person standing for it. Now they're actually quietly coming around to being more cautious, as they should. Level with the American people here. Ukraine is not a paragon of democracy. This is a country that has banned 11 opposition parties. It has consolidated all media into one state TV media arm. That's not democratic. It has threatened not to hold elections this year unless the U.S. forks over more money. That is not democratic. It has celebrated a Nazi in its ranks, the comedian in cargo pants, a man called Zelensky, doing it in their own ranks. That is not democratic. More facts for you that you won't hear from the mainstream in either party or the mainstream media. The regions of Ukraine that are occupied by Russia right now, in the Donbass, Luhansk, Donetsk, these are Russian-speaking regions that have not even been part of Ukraine since 2014, that other people probably couldn't name those provinces for you. Those are the hard facts.
Exactly what I
said. And so to
said.
frame this as some kind of battle between good versus evil, don't buy it. And I'd like the likes of the sharpest of the war hawks on Ukraine, Nikki Haley, to have some accountability and answer. Do you want to use U.S. taxpayer money to fund the banning of Christians? That is actually what's happening. They're using the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. They have banned them. The Ukrainian parliament just did this last week, supported by our dollars. And I think you owe it to the American people, Nikki, to at least this one time at least condemn.
Thank you. That's time.
At least to condemn their banning of Christians.
Mr. Ramaswamy, thank you. Mr. Ramaswamy, thank you. We asked the questions.
I like it. Jab at her a little bit.
What is your take on more funding for Ukraine?
I am telling you, Putin and President Xi are salivating at the thought that someone like that could become president. They would love to see
the fact of the matter is she doesn't answer.
So this is what I will tell you.
You were in the UN when Trump was president. You should know that's a complete lie.
The ambassador has the floor.
Thank you. The first thing I'll tell you is we all remember what that thug did when he invaded Ukraine. We all know that 500,000 people have died because of Putin. And here is a freedom-loving, pro-American country that is fighting for its survival and its democracy.
Territorial dispute.
No, I don't think we should give them cash. I think we should give them the equipment and the ammunition to win. And I'll tell you, if Biden
which
had
they
done it
went
when
and
they
sold to
first asked
Mexico
for
and
it,
other
this war
Middle
would be
Eastern
over.
countries.
But let's also remember this.
God.
When you left Afghanistan in shambles and left them with a ton of weapons and money, it's not that we left, it's how we left. When you look at Ukraine,
Well,
don't
it's the
think
fact that
for
we
a
left.
second. Now everybody wants to move away from Ukraine. They'll want to move away from Israel a year from now. America can never be so arrogant to think we don't need friends. After 9/11, we needed a lot of friends.
We need to control
now
our
is the time to
country.
get partnerships.
It is
This
failing in
unholy
real time.
alliance
We don't have the
between Russia,
luxury to do
Ukraine,
this.
and China is real. There
No,
is
it's
a
not.
reason the Taiwanese want us to support
Well, actually,
the
okay, it
Ukrainians.
is when it comes
It's
to the
because
BRICS
they know
currency,
that
because they
China's
know-
coming after them
no,
next.
they
There
know
is a
that the
reason Ukrainians want us to support Israelis, because they know
No.
that if Iran wins,
Okay.
Russia wins. We have to see the combination
The
of this.
BRICS currencies with China and Russia want to team up because the U.S. dollar is failing so miserably.
Americans be expected to help fund the war in Ukraine?
Kirsten, let's remember the last time that we turned our back on a shooting war in Europe. It bought us just a couple of years. And then 500,000 Americans were killed in Europe to defeat Hitler. This is not a choice. This is the price we pay for being the leaders of the free world. And the fact is, this alliance is not just with Russia and China. Governor Haley knows this. Iran is in the middle of this as well, and so is North Korea. And they are all working to support Russia right now. And the reason they're doing it is because dictators work together. People who believe in democracy work together. We must stand with all of those that are standing up for democracy and freedom in this world. And by the way, let's remind everybody of this. In 1992, this country made a promise to Ukraine. We said if you return nuclear missiles
in 1992, lots changed since then,
to Russia, and they invade you, we will protect you. An American promise that's 31 years old is no different than an American promise that's made tonight on this stage. We need to stand by it. And those of us who forget
not when
history
transpiring
are doomed
events
to repeat it.
Literally change the relationship of the country.
Yeah,
let's hear what Vivek has to say.
Absolute giving in to dictators, which is being suggested on this stage, just shows the immaturity of the approach.
Donald Trump was fine. He handled China perfectly. He had all these great relationships. Our economy was great. Explain that.
This could become a wider war if Putin is not stopped now.
Well, any suggestion by Zelensky or anyone else that we're going to eventually have U.S. troops there, I can tell the American people when I'm president that will not happen. We are not going to send your sons and daughters to Ukraine. I am going to send troops to our southern border. If you look at the threats that we face, terrorists have come in through our southern border. I'm going to shut it down. I'm going to
like how he goes to that
I'm going to
first.
deport
100%.
the people who've come, particularly under Biden, who've come from the Middle East, come from all these places. Now, Biden wants $105 billion. 60, most of that's Ukraine, including some of it going to pay pensions for bureaucrats and salaries. That is a totally ridiculous use of American tax dollars. He says he has money for border to try to do, and the media repeat that. When you look at it, what most of the money is money to process more illegal aliens into this country. How is that solving the problem? That's making the problem worse. And what does he do for the Indo-Pacific? A pittance That is the top threat that we face. We need to bring this war to an end. We need the Europeans to step up and do their fair share. And we need to get serious about the top threat that this country faces, which is the Chinese Communist Party.
So if I may respond to the Ukraine question.
In fact, we are going to go from the hot war
I'm okay with that answer.
Ukraine and Gaza and Israel to what many people are calling the new Cold War with China. And I remind the audience that it's important for our visitors at home to be able to hear you, and especially for the people in Beijing to hear you. Many Republicans believe that the Chinese Communist Party and General Secretary Xi is an existential threat to the United States. The flashpoint is Taiwan. American military, but primarily the United States Navy, has deterred an attack from China to the island state of Taiwan. But Ronald Reagan's Navy of 600 ships is gone. Now, the question to you is, and I'll start with you, Ambassador Haley, because you were in President Trump's cabinet. His goal was a 355-ship Navy. That's what he pushed for. He got to 300. It's now at 291. Is that big enough to deter and, if necessary, defeat an invasion of Taiwan?
China has the largest naval fleet in the world. They have 350 ships. They'll have 400 ships in 2 years. We won't even have 350 ships in 2 decades. China has built up their military. It's not just land, air, and sea. They're doing cyber. They're doing artificial intelligence. They're doing space. America needs to modernize our military. We need to do everything we can. The first thing is you go and you make sure you have the backs of Ukraine. That's why the Taiwanese want us to support Ukraine, because they know that sends the biggest message to China. The second thing is we go to China.
It makes our military weaker by sending forces over there for no purpose.
Our American soil to China, and let's take back what they've already stolen. Then you go and to the universities. No more having millions of dollars go to our universities. Then we will go and end all formal trade relations with China until they stop murdering Americans from fentanyl, something Ron has yet to say that he's going to do. And then we modernize our military. When we strengthen our military, when we modernize it with the focus of cyber, artificial intelligence, and space, when we make sure that we have the backs of our friends, whether it's in Israel, whether it's in Ukraine, and we should be arming Taiwan. Make sure they have the equipment they need. Make sure they have the training they need now. There is nothing China fears more than knowing that America will have Taiwan's back. Let's make sure that we show it by making sure they have the equipment they need.
Governor DeSantis, my question is specifically about the Navy. It's at 291. It's going to go down perhaps as low as 280. Is it enough? And what would you build if you were going to build more?
Not enough. We have to have the ability to back up a strategy of denial of President Xi's ambitions. And if China is able to be the world's leading superpower, that will affect you and your family in ways that are going to be very bad. They will export authoritarianism all around the world as the cost of doing business. They will impose things like social credit scores and internet monitoring. CBDC. So this is, to this generation, what the Soviet Union was to the post-World War II generation. I've already released a plan. We're going to get to 355 ships at the end of the first term, 385 ships at the end of the second term, but we're going to have a path to 600 ships over the next 20 years. I think the future of freedom is going to be determined in the Indo-Pacific. We have a strategy not just military, but decoupling from the economy and fighting them here at home with their cultural. You know, Ambassador Haley said somehow I wasn't doing. She welcomed them into South Carolina, gave them land near a military base, wrote the Chinese ambassador a love letter saying what a great friend they were. That was like their #1 way to do economic development. In Florida, I banned China from buying land in this state, and we kicked out.
Well, you did let some of them buy an incremental amount of land
out of our universities. We've recognized the threat, and we've acted swiftly and decisively.
Senator Scott, you've been in the Congress since 2011. Defense spending has fallen over that entire period of time. Where are we going to get the money, and what would you build, and what kind of ships to deter China from attacking Taiwan?
Well, 2 major problems with the question. Number one, we do not have currently a defense industrial bank to allow us to have the kind of production that we need in order to keep America safe. Frankly, if we are not prepared to fight and engage in 3 continents at the same time, think about where we are today. In the Middle East, we are in the midst of trying to back our strongest ally. In Eastern Europe, we've seen our resources and our weaponry help degrade the Russian military. The Indo-Pacific, we have real challenges. The long-term threat is China. Immediate threat is our southern border. In order for us to have the military to fight 3 different continents at the exact same time. We are going to have to invest heavily in our military, but we're also going to have to invest heavily in an industrial base so that we can hit our objectives from a military perspective, not only with our ships, but also with our planes. We are so old as a military that in order for us to recalibrate, we're going to have to invest. One of the things I do in my Made in America strategy is we create more than 4 million new jobs by having high-tech manufacturing come back to America, decoupling from China, so that we focus our attention on creating that industrial revolution that will be necessary for us to achieve the goal of having a military that is ready to be lethal and come home safe.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Ramaswamy, I'm looking for specifics. What would you build? Where would you build it? When would they be in the water? How big would the fleet get?
First answer is end the toxic divest to invest program. For people who don't know about that, we're decommissioning ships in the South China Sea. The foundation of war is economics. Rebuild our defense industrial base at home. But here's the dirty little secret. Our actual defense industrial base depends on China for the supply chain, for the F-35 jets, for the ships that we're building. Think about this. Why are we stockpiling that if it isn't to actually be strong against our enemy, China?
Same with electric
cars. We depend on them for that. Just like we depend on them for pharmaceuticals, just like we depend on them for semiconductors. So here's why we can't get tough with China. It's because we depend on them for our modern way of life, and we have to declare economic independence from our enemy. That's the Declaration of Independence that Thomas Jefferson, at the age of 33, would have signed today if he were alive.
Absolutely.
That's the Declaration of Independence that I will sign as the next president. I do have to recognize that Ron DeSantis was correct about acknowledging Nikki Haley's tough talk when she was ambassador to the UN, calling China our great friend, bringing the CCP to South Carolina. What he left out, though, Ron, and be honest about it, there was a lobbying-based exemption in that bill that allowed Chinese nationals to buy land within a 20-mile radius of a military base lobbied for by one of your donors. So I think we have to call a spade a spade. We need politicians who are independent of the forces that increase our dependence on China. My message to Xi Jinping is this. You are done buying land in this country. You will not donate to universities in this country. U.S. businesses won't expand into the Chinese market until you play by the same set of rules.
Mr. Ramaswamy,
you're kicked out of the WTO, and you actually have to have accountability for the COVID-19 pandemic financially.
Yep,
Which I'm going to tell the world, we have to hold them accountable.
We're just not going to mention that it came from a Wuhan lab, a lab leak.
I think that we need to increase our naval capacity by at least 20% over the course of the next several years. I think we have to, at minimum, be able to meet our AUKUS agreement standards. Right now, we are at risk of not even being able to meet our AUKUS standards with Australia and the UK. So what we need to do is have a plan that reverses the trajectory of the divest to invest program
Hugh, I'd like to
by
respond.
20% over the next 3 years.
Governor Christie?
You know, my first observation, Hugh, is that nobody answers your question. And my second observation is these three in the middle think they're the enemy. I know China is the enemy, and that's what we should be focused on. So let's be really clear. The nuclear submarines in this United States Navy is the greatest deterrent to Chinese aggression, and that is the first place I would go to increase American naval power. Our nuclear submarines are able to move stealthily, quietly, and effectively, and if we are going to deter China from invading Taiwan, the only way we're going to do it is to make sure that they don't know whether how many nuclear submarines from the United States of America are in the South China Sea and in that area and ready to strike on them if they decide to move on Taiwan. And so we, as our first priority, need to go directly to our nuclear sub program, Hugh, and we need to increase it drastically. That would be priority number one. Ships would come next, but to me, the ships are secondary choice here. The submarines are the single most important thing that we could be deterring, that we could be using to deter China. But the other thing we could do to deter China is to let them know that the blood money they're spending for Russia in Ukraine right now will not be effective, that we send Putin home with his tail between his legs and make them understand that the same fate waits for them if they decide to move
They're so
towards
deluded
Taiwan
in the fact that they think the USSR is actually set on world domination.
Thank you, Governor.
That
We're going
is
to take a
so
brief pause now, and we'll be back to the
far from the
Republican
truth.
presidential primary debate. Please stay tuned.
Crazy. Hopefully they actually get into some interesting topics here.
welcome back to tonight's NBC News Republican presidential debate. Once again, here's Hugh Hewitt.
Thank you, Lester. We're going to stay on China, and we're going to talk specifically about TikTok. Last week, Congressman Mike Gallagher, who is chairman of the House Bipartisan Select Committee on the Chinese Communist Party, published a long essay on TikTok following the flooding of pro-Hamas propaganda onto TikTok accounts across the United States. Chairman Gallagher called it shocking. He called the app predatory, controlled by America's preeminent adversary, one used to push propaganda and divide America. It's spyware, he said, a means of surveillance. Governor Christie, do you agree with Chairman Gallagher? And if so, would you ban or force the sale of TikTok?
I agree 100% with Chairman Gallagher, and let me say this. TikTok is not only spyware, it is polluting the minds of American young people all throughout this country, and they're doing it intentionally. And when you saw what happened in the last few weeks with all of this anti-Semitic, horrible stuff that their algorithms were pushing out at a gargantuan rate, this is China trying to further divide the United States of America. And this is one of the
He's
big
thinking about what he
failings
ordered from
among
Jimmy
many of the
John's
Trump
before the
administration.
debate.
He talked tough about TikTok. I heard him do it many times. But when it came down to it, he did not ban them when he could have and should have. And now since then, we've had an additional nearly 6 years of this type of poison being put out throughout the United States, even putting aside the spying, which we know is going on, and the theft of American personal data and information. So in my first week as president, we would ban TikTok. They want to go ahead and sell it? Let them go ahead and sell it. But I'll tell you another reason we would do it. Facebook's not in China. X is not in China. They're not permitting a free flow of information to the Chinese people from our social media companies, yet we just open the door and let them do what they're doing. TikTok should be banned because they are poisoning American minds, and I would do it week one.
Thank you, Governor. I want to go to Governor DeSantis. Would you ban or force the sale of TikTok, regardless of whether or not China allowed American apps to operate in China?
Yes, I think that China's the top threat we face. They've been very effective at infiltrating different parts of our society. So my policy on China and the Chinese Communist Party is very simple. We win, they lose. And in order to do that, it's not just military, it's economic, and it's cultural. And as the dad of a 6'5" and a 3-year-old, I'm concerned about the data that they're getting from our young people and what they're doing to pollute the minds of our young people. These kids get these devices and they have a mind of their own. And I know a lot of parents are looking, it's hard to even keep it out. China's obviously the most extreme, but this is happening with other things. So we are going to do that, and we are going to make sure to protect the American people. It's a full
data
spectrum
companies
approach
sell
to be able to
information
fend China
to
off.
all
Yes,
sorts of
military
companies
deterrence.
around the
Yes,
world,
economic
including China.
decoupling, but also their role in our culture. If we ignore that, we're not going to be able to win the fight.
Thank you, Governor. Ambassador Haley, speak to the parents out there. There are probably TikTok apps on half the phones in this auditorium.
No, I'm going to speak to the fact that 2 people hit me and you didn't let me respond. So let's first talk about the fact that they want to talk about the Chinese land from 10 years ago. Yes, I brought a fiberglass company 10 years ago to South Carolina. But Ron, you are the chair of your economic development agency that as of last week said Florida is the ideal place for Chinese businesses. Not only that, you have a company that is manufacturer of Chinese military planes. You have it. They are expanding 2 training sites at 2 of your airports now, one which is 12 miles away from a naval base. Then you have another company that's expanding, and they were just invaded by the Department of Homeland Security. So mine was 10 years ago.
You gave
Yours
them
was
stuff.
6
I
months
didn't
ago.
give them anything.
What's your story?
And I abolished that agency that she's talking about.
No,
Enterprise Florida, we abolished it, and of course we banned China
from
from
the website
Not
last
exactly
week.
a
Go
great
check.
recruiting pitch if you're banning them from purchasing land
scrubbed
at
the
all.
website
So we've stood
last
up
week.
and we've
Thank you,
done the
Ambassador
right thing
Haley.
in Florida.
Mr. Ramaswamy, we've talked about this. You campaign on TikTok. How do you get TikTok banned if you use it?
Well, I want to laugh at why Nikki Haley didn't answer your question, which is about looking at families in the eye. In the last debate, she made fun of me for actually joining TikTok while her own daughter was actually using the app for a long time. So you might want to take care of your family first.
Leave my daughter out of your voice.
Adult daughter. The next generation of Americans are using it.
That's funny.
And that's actually
Oh, they're booing
have
him.
her supporters propping her up. That's fine. Here's the truth.
You're just
the easy
scum.
answer is actually to
You're
say that
just
we're just going to
scum.
ban one app. We got to go further. We have to ban any U.S. company actually transferring U.S. data to the Chinese. Here's a story
Yeah, the
most
data.
people
It's
don't
not
know.
just
Airbnb
TikTok.
hands over U.S. user data to the CCP.
Yep,
And one of the few people who is putting up content the way the actual algorithms work, speaking for pro-Israel views or others, is
Ambassador
me. And I predict
Haley,
more Republicans will join it. But stop U.S. companies from turning over data to Chinese companies. That's the real
Moderators
answer,
like
not the virtue
Kristen
signal.
don't get to respond to personal attacks,
Yeah.
but you do.
Thank you very much. You know, when he talks about me praising China, he doesn't know the fact that the reason China was praised was because I negotiated with China and Russia the largest set of sanctions against North Korea in a generation. That is literally the reason North Korea stopped testing ballistic missiles. So I said China did good on their part. That was a
You said they
negotiation
were
you
a great
could
friend
never
is
do.
what you said, Nikki. Those are your words, not mine. And so just own up to it.
You would never
you can
have been
change
able
your
to
mind.
get
That's
that
allowed.
negotiation
But don't
done.
lie to the people
Oh,
about what you've
well.
said or what you've done in
Against
South
China,
Carolina.
my
You have
entire
looks like she did say
career
that.
with the
Ron is
United
right about
Nations.
that.
Every day I fought China, and I did it
Look at the
by
actual
making sure
hard
no
facts.
one
She
could
brought
get
them to the
any
Warren up to
agency
that.
heads in UN. I did it by making sure that we called them out on human rights. I did it by making sure that we held them accountable on everything that they did. That's the reason we got out of Human Rights Council. That's the reason we called them out. And there's not been a day I haven't
Nikki,
stopped
Senator
reading.
Scott, it is your turn.
Policy
Mr.
experience with the millions you
Ramaswamy,
made afterwards.
everybody else is hanging on to the
Exactly.
rules here, Mr. Ramaswamy. Senator Scott.
Thank you. We should. I appreciate y'all clapping for me already. This is wonderful answer. Love this. Without any question.
What is he doing?
we should do is ban TikTok, period.
He's a goofball.
Now, we saw under former President Trump, he tried to ban TikTok twice, but was struck down by our federal courts. If you cannot ban TikTok, you should eliminate the Chinese presence on the app. Period. We also should provide, in my parents' Bill of Rights, we give parents the opportunity to give their kids permission under 14 to be on those apps. I think it's incredibly important for us as Americans to take back control of the information, especially of our kids. Where does it go? We should know that. One of the ways that we get to know that is by having a parental consent. But if we can eliminate TikTok, that is a first step. But it's not just TikTok. China continues to spy on our kids, but they're also buying our farmlands. We talked about that several times there. We have to make sure that we use the tools that are in our toolkit to stop China from buying farmland near our bases. The third thing
We've
have
been
to
talking
do is
about
make
China
sure
for, like,
that they stop
probably
stealing
half this
our
debate.
intellectual property. They're literally stealing our IP to compete against us.
Well, welcome back, everyone. With only 2 hours for a debate, we know there are other major issues that are important to Republican primary voters. I'll ask you each to please use your closing statement to focus on any topic you didn't have time to address and why you and not former President Trump would be the party's best choice to tackle these important issues. You each have a minute. Senator Scott, we'll start with you. 1 minute.
There's a crisis that is growing in our nation, and that crisis is cultural and spiritual. We need a renewal, a great awakening. We should reject the left's valueless, faithless, fatherless society. We should turn back to faith, patriotism, and individual responsibility. We should stop choosing victimhood and start choosing victory. We should stop kneeling in protest and start kneeling in prayer. There are basic truths that built this country. If you're able-bodied in America, you work. If you take out a loan, you pay it back. If you commit a violent crime, you go to jail. And if God made you a man, you play sports against men. I do not just want to...
Audience, please.
I I do not just want to win the battle against Joe Biden. I want us together to win the war for our Christian conservative values that changed my life.
Senator Scott, thank you. Governor Christie, you have...
Didn't really answer the question. How are you going to be better than President Trump? Wasn't really a persuasive answer there.
Thank you for hosting tonight. Listen, it's a gift to be an American. And I'm running for President of the United States because I'm tired. I'm tired of seeing the division. I'm tired of seeing the anger. And I can see in the eyes of Americans their exhaustion. Their exhaustion from the petty personal politics that have taken over this country over the last number of years. I'm running for president to be a president of consequence, to do the big things, to make sure that America's role in the world stays number one, that we stand up for our friends and allies around the world, and we stand up for what we believe in right here at home. And it's not to eliminate our differences. Our differences has always been our strength as a country, not our weakness. But you can't truly say you love America unless you're ready to open up your heart to every American. I'm going to open up my heart to every American as president, and I will make sure that I return honesty, integrity to the Oval Office. We deserve and should accept nothing less.
Governor, thank you very much. Let's go to Mr. Ramaswamy now. Your 1 minute.
We've talked a lot about foreign wars tonight, but we're in the middle of a war right here at home. It's a war not between black and white or Democrat and Republican. It's between those of us who believe in our founding ideals and love this country and a fringe minority who hates the United States of America. And I think it's going to take a commander-in-chief to lead us to victory in that war, who first of all knows that we're in a war. Second of all, can't be captured by the special interests along the way. But third is from the next generation, somebody with fresh legs to lead us to victory. I'll shut down the deep state. I'll declare economic independence from China. I'll keep us out of World War III and then revive national pride in this country. I also want to close with one message to the Democrat Party. End this farce that Joe Biden is going to be your nominee. We know he's not even the president of the United States. He's a puppet for the managerial class.
Exactly.
So have the guts to step up and be honest about who you're actually going to put up so we can have an honest debate. Biden should step aside, end his candidacy now, so we can see whether it's Newsom or Michelle Obama or whoever else.
Yep.
Right,
just
Mr.
tell us the
Swamy,
truth so we can have an honest debate.
Ambassador Haley, you have 1 minute for your closing.
Thank you. The world is on fire. We have a war in Europe. We've got a war in the Middle East. We've got China on the march. It is very important that we know how to defend our freedoms and how to defeat terrorism and socialism. We have to know the difference between good and evil. We have to know the difference between right and wrong. We need to know that a strong America doesn't start wars. A strong America prevents wars. And the way we can focus on that is to make sure we go back to the soul
coming from
of
the
America
person that's
and
talking
be
about
strong
sending
and proud again.
what,
and we can't
thousands
do that.
of people to
we can't win the fights of the
Israel
21st century
and
with
Ukraine?
politicians from the 20th century. We have to move forward, and we can do this. I know we can do this. So join our movement. Go to NikkiHaley.com, and we will once again show what America that's strong and proud looks like. God bless.
Ambassador, thank you. Governor DeSantis, your closing, you have 1 minute.
We must reverse our country's decline, and that is going to require leadership. I will take the hits, I will take the arrows, I will take the barbs, because it's not about me, it's about you. It's not about the past, it's about your future. We are going to fight for you. I am going to win for you and your family, and I'm going to lead this country's revival. As a veteran of the Iraq War and in the Navy, I will always put service above self as president. As the father of 3 young kids, I'm going to ensure that this country is left to the next generation in better shape than we found it. And as the governor of Florida, I delivered on all my promises, and you can trust me to deliver for you as the president of the United States. I am asking for your vote. I'll be a nominee that will be able to win the election. I will be a leader you can be proud of, and as your president, I will not let you down. God bless you.
Governor DeSantis, thank you.
I think Vivek gave the best closing statement there. A lot of those weren't very persuasive answers.
That is going to conclude our debate. The next line says, if the audience can hold their applause. That didn't work out. But anyway, for just a few more seconds, I'll ask you to just hold the applause. On behalf of my fellow moderators, I want to thank the candidates for their time and for this spirited debate. Really good, deep conversation, and we appreciate you all being here. Thank you as well to our wonderful hosts here at the Adrienne Arsh Performing Arts Center. On behalf of the Republican National Committee and all of us at NBC News, good night, everyone, from Miami.
There you have it, round 3. All right, so there you have it, the third Republican debate of the 2024 presidential election, and probably the second to last of 2023. It was pretty much what I predicted for the most part. Half the debate was focused on foreign issues rather than things happening on our own soil. So there was that. And there was also Vivek Ramaswamy being attacked. And it was only from Nikki Haley this time. It was pretty much Vivek versus Nikki, this debate. It wasn't, DeSantis and everybody else. It was primarily him versus her. So, and I think Vivek really creamed her a few times. He had her on the TikTok thing, and also mentioning her time as governor, making so much money off of signing military contracts. But other than that, it was a pretty ordinary debate. I mean, obviously, there's the 2 wars going on, so most of it was focused on that, and obviously China. But I really think that it was kind of similar to the second one. Wasn't crazy exciting. I think other than Nikki Haley and Vivek, it would have been, just a boring, regular debate. I will say, though, 4 out of the 5 candidates' response on Israel really shows that the neocon establishment is so pro-Israel that it shows from the candidates on stage: Chris Christie, Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott. Vivek a little bit, he's definitely pro-Israel, but he wasn't to the point to where he wants to send all these troops and all this taxpayer money like the other candidates do. And I'm someone who's America first, and I think we need to focus on our own issues. Obviously, our southern border. We've got a mental health crisis. I don't think that we need to be spending any more time and money and resources on these countries that, frankly, I don't think many of these politicians could pinpoint on a map. But yeah, you can tell there's a lot of neoconservatives that are up there on that stage that are bought and sold. They can only say a very limited amount of things that they really mean. And Vivek really called that out. You can tell he's probably the realest person on stage. Biased or not, I really think he killed that debate. He definitely won that for sure. And I think, if anything, it's going to help his campaign for sure. I mean, he's coming in here with very little political and debate experience, and he's steamrolling these career politicians. Like Nikki Haley she had nothing to say when it came to the TikTok. I mean, she was really triggered. She said, "Keep my daughter's name out of your mouth," or whatever that was. But she had nothing to say. And especially when he said, "Come on, Nikki, are you going to tell the truth? Are you going to tell us that you made money every time on board and Boeing?" And she said, "Oh, well, you're going to say that." Like, she didn't even answer the question. She didn't say yes or no. So this isn't the first time. I called her out the very first debate. She lied like 3 times. She did again the second time. Nikki Haley I think she's very corrupt. I think she is almost like Hillary, and I don't think she is even running for the right party, in my opinion. She might as well just run for the Democrats at this point. In all reality, a lot of these debates are probably going to be the same until Trump steps in, or if he even does. But I'm going to take a guess that Chris Christie and Tim Scott probably won't even make it into the next year. I mean, I really don't even understand Chris Christie at all. Tim Scott's pretty obscure, to be honest. I don't even know who appeals to him. So I have a hard time seeing how these guys even make it to the next debates and even qualify. So, especially Chris Christie. I mean, he's a failed governor. He left with like a 2% approval rating more than 10 years ago. He ran in 2016, literally dropped out like 6 months. I think he was the first Republican candidate out of the 11 that were invited to their debates back then. He was the first one to drop out, and now he's serious about running. I mean, I don't get it. And back then, it's pretty funny. He was all buddy-buddy with Donald Trump. And Donald Trump obviously doesn't put him in the position of power when Trump was president. So he obviously was upset about that. And, that's why he's hell-bent on going after Donald Trump. And that's pretty much you know, his entire campaign. I believe the fourth debate's going to be held on News Nation in about a month, some point in December. I'll have to clarify on that, and we'll update you guys with that. And we'll also do another reaction video to that, regardless how uninteresting it may be, like this one and the previous one. But these are historical events. It's not only important that we televise them, but it's important that we also react to them so we can show future generations a real, authentic perspective of how these things went down. I mean, this is history. And all we really have to recite to, or at least when I went to school, all we had to recite to were the history books. And better yet, to have autonomous streamers, independent streamers, have a bit of say rather than just, you know, the mainstream or just one company, one monopolized market in general. It'll be pretty cool to see these things play out years from now. And, you know, some of the candidates on stage could very well eventually be president of the United States. I think some of them will. So, but yeah, we'll get that fourth debate going. We'll have a live reaction to that in December. It'll be on News Nation. I'll have to confirm the exact debate. I believe every single... I heard that Vivek, DeSantis, and Haley all qualified for this, and I think Christie was on the fence, and I'm not even sure about Tim Scott. But yeah, that'll be in about a month, and we'll cover it then. So until next time, guys.